dear friends, thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored and happy to be here, and it's I can feel that something beautiful is about to happen in Greece. I think so, sincerely. My friend there, who I can't remember the name of, said a lot of things. You know that you can get a headset if you don't speak English, and then you can get translation, like a piece like this. Somebody can borrow mine if they want, but you can get translation. Also, I have the horrible tendency of speaking a little bit fast. If I start doing that, somebody has to go like, and I will slow down. Okay. Yeah, it's my signal to slow down. Thank you. Yes, I come from this strange island that he was talking about here before, Iceland. And I'm again very thankful for being here. Especially want to thank my friend Nikos, who's been wonderful to me. I got sunburned today. This is this is very warm for me. Okay, but what I want to talk about is this little book here, a new constitution for Iceland. I don't know how many people wrote it because we wrote it all together. You know, like maybe hundreds or thousands. I don't know. But it's a new basis for our society. And like he said, our society collapsed big time in 2008. And before that, we were completely clueless. We were like, oh, we live in the best country in the world, everything is perfect here, you know. We're really rich and we just do what we want and we go and we travel and, you know, we don't have to worry. And this is great. Capitalism, brilliant. And then it was like a unbelievable, moment of clarity when we realized that everything was really fake. And I think the whole Western world, or the whole world really, is facing the same thing. Basically, we're at this point in time now where we just need to realize that this cannot go on. This financial system that we think is real is not real. And the whole thing that we're made to believe that we should really sort of build our life around is not real either. The only thing that is real is our own lives and our feelings towards each other, and the fact that we can change the world if we want to through our persistency. And for sure that is the case in Greece just as in Iceland. Now in Iceland we were very angry in 2008, and I can feel that you're very angry in Greece now, and I think it's very understandable. The only thing anger is not supposed to do is lead us to violence, you know. If we're angry, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Anger is just as a good emotion as happiness or laughing or anything, if it is suitable, you know. When somebody betrays you, like I suppose you have the feeling that your government has done to you, like we had the feeling in 2008, you get angry. Just like if your friend lies to you or something. But then it's a matter of what you're going to do to that anger. Are you going to let it fester within you and become bitter and start being the same to others, or are you going to try to make it into something constructive? And I hope that the Icelandic case is a case of the later scenario, where we try to find out what we could do, at least to prevent this from happening again, and to try to make a just and more beautiful society in Iceland. Because what we thought we had, this brilliant place in 2007, did not exist. You know, it was a lie, and it was based on the crazy decisions made somewhere in the banking system, which had turned enormous and ate up the Icelandic economy overnight. And when everything collapsed, we did not know the next day if our credit cards were going to work. We did not have a clue. It was like a complete darkness for us, because we had just gotten used to everything just being so effortless. And the collapse in 2008 in Iceland, it was total. It was moral. It was, of course, financial, but it was also political. And at the end of the day, I think the political collapse is the most important lesson, and I think that's what we can use in other places like Greece and everywhere else. Maybe the system that we're using now isn't working, where you have political parties and you invest all your trust in them by voting once every 4 years, and then they're just supposed to figure it all out, and you just go home and eat pasta or something. I mean, this is not democracy, this is something else. It worked fine when we all had to go on horseback, you know, back in 1800 to meet, you know. But now we have the internet and we have ways of connecting with each other really fast, and we have information available to us widely, and we can make our own informed decisions without those professional politicians. That's a fact, you know. So why should we rebuild the same system over and over again just to see it collapse? It's a question that we really need to ask ourselves. And in the protests in Iceland, you saw some pictures here, but you are highly professional protesters yourself. I'm not going to tell you anything about that, but it's quite unusual for Icelanders to go on the streets like that. We normally just sit at home and drink or something and watch TV and you know, relax. But we were like, okay, they're not going to change. What can we do? So we went out on the streets with our pots and pans, and we were just standing there and banging until we got the change. We got the elections, because first they said we were not going to get the elections, and we got a lot of change. And it's really funny, if you're in Iceland, people feel like there's not enough change at the very end, but still at the very like, oh, the current government is not good enough, and nothing is good enough, and everything is happening so slow, and the people still have so much debt, thank you, and everything. So people are getting frustrated, but from the outside, people are more able to see the things that have happened. And again, I would like to talk to this one. And I think about this thing, what is the most important thing, it's not necessarily what says inside it. It's how it was written. Thank you. Slow. Okay. You know, if you want to do something good, you have to like be the change that you're asking for, right? So when we had 4 months to write the new constitution in Iceland, we had to be transparent. You know, we had to be distribute the power and do and give away the power really and responsibility of the power. And we had a really old constitution that was from the year 1944 when we had our own independence from Denmark, and we had always planned to rewrite it. But the problem is that when you give power holders power, they don't really want to give it away again. They're like, no, let's not worry about that. Let's do something else. It's not because they're evil. It's just because this is the side effect of power. When you get power, you don't want to give it away. No. So it's an inbuilt flaw in the system. You say this is how you give power to some people, but then as soon as you give them the power, they're almost unable to change it themselves because they have the power. That's why you need to give it back to the people who are actually the real power holders and who just lend the others the power for a little while. And then you get a real document that matters, because you cannot, unfortunately, trust the power to distribute the power. It just doesn't want to do it. It's physics. I don't know why. After the crash, there was like a moment of clarity in Iceland. Finally, we had a chance to reconsider everything. And of course also our social contract and constitution. But how are we going to do it? Were we going to just get the normal 20 lawyers, the usual suspects, to sit down somewhere in a fancy room and write a little bit changed version of the one we had? No. We had to really try to find something else because we knew that the old ways weren't working. So one of the most beautiful things I think was about it was randomly selected 1,000 people in Iceland. Just anybody. And they were from the age of 18 to 95 or something. And they all met for one day, and they were just together in a big sports hall, brainstorming on what sort of society and what sort of constitution they wanted. Out of this came like a really nice report with very high hopes and a very beautiful picture of society, I have to say, because the public is very clever, non-dependent of what the power holders want you to believe. You know, they always say that people can't be trusted, and they will just be irrational, and they won't be taking enough time to really get to know it. And this is all bullshit. I now know that because we were really listening to the public in this whole scenario, and it's just not true. It is not true. And after this 1,000 people had come up with ideas for the future, we got 5 specialists, because you also need the specialists. You cannot not just override them. They're really important. They're just not more important than others, So the 5 specialists, they sat down for a few months and they wrote a 600-page report about everything that had been done so far in constitutional writing in Iceland, about what the 1,000 people wanted, and about how we could probably continue. So after that we had the random people and we had the specialists, and now we had to find a way to actually write the thing. So we had the general elections, and out of that 25 people were elected. And they had problems in the beginning because the Supreme Court tried to invalid the elections, but in the end it started anyway. And I was one of those people, and we were just general citizens. Nobody there was like a politician. Some of the people there had been political and had participated, but at that table we were all even, you know. And it was really funny mixture of people. It was like mathematicians and farmers and all sorts of different people together with one common goal: write a new constitution for Iceland. And in 4 months, that is not possible, really. But we managed to do it, and the only reason why is because we gave it to the public. We said, okay, it's impossible to find all the ideas and do everything in these 4 months, us 25, so we will just open everything up. And every week we will give out on the internet everything we have written, and then we just go like, and they can comment through Facebook, and they can say anything they want, and they can rip it apart if they want, but it's not ours to control, it's for everybody to write together. And we did that, and I admit, in the beginning, we were very afraid, because we thought we were going to get like hate speech or something online, because sometimes the dialogue online is very brutal, you know that, right? But on the contrary, it was very civilized, and it was very caring, and it was very clever. And the ideas we got from the people, the feedback through Facebook and through errands, was some of the best ideas in here, you know. Even though we thought we were great, we were just not great compared to the people and the ideas that were coming from outside. So each week we also had an online meeting where we discussed every change that we had made and put on the new draft. So the draft was developing week by week online, and everybody could comment. And we had 3 committees, and we tried to look at all the comments and talk about them in our committees. And that took a lot of time, but it was worth it. So in the end, this participation of the public became sort of like the brand of this whole process. And the crowdsourcing of a constitution sounds very good, but it's not exactly what it is. It's basically just an open dialogue. And I know it's now being used in Tunisia, it's being used in Ireland, it's being used in Algeria. It's like a method that worked. That's a fact. You know, people could have different opinions of what says in here, but the methodology worked. Another thing that I would highly recommend that we did is using consensus methodology. So not trying to override the minority just because you can, and voting on everything, but trying to understand why the other person feels that and you feel this. How can you find a new way that both people can actually live with? You know, I thought that was ridiculous in the beginning. I thought, okay, no, we're never going to be able to. We just have so little time. But then we started, and it's really amazing what happens. You know, I come in there and I think, okay, I have the best idea, for sure. Another person comes in there and they think they have the best idea. Then we meet and we're not agreeing. So instead of me trying to convince the other person of my idea being better than hers, we try to think a new idea. And we did that in 3 really big matters in this occasion. And the new ideas were always much more brilliant than my idea or her idea. And this is a methodology which is very far from the normal war logic that we use in politics, where the minority always just has to back off, and the majority is like, haha, you're conquered, go away. You know, it just leaves other people hurt, and they don't want to work with the others in the next topic. And it is a really deconstructive methodology. I don't understand why it's being used in politics all over the world, because it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You know, we just create a lot of enemies and a lot of battle zones where we could actually be creating cooperative zones. So this is a really important point that I think we did in a good way. And there is like 3 main areas that we wanted to try to focus on in our work to change for Iceland for the future. And one is distributing power. You know, it's probably the same problem here in Greece, that when the power accumulates in very few places, it just starts to destroy everything, you know. And it's not because people are bad, it's just because people are not perfect. We're just animals in the end of the day, and we're a little bit greedy and a little bit imperfect, but we're not necessarily evil. But if we get too much power, we become a little bit stupid. So I think if you want to acknowledge the fact that power is not something that is something that you should seek, like most people think it's very obvious that you want more power, but why? I think you should rather consider power like illness or something. If you get it, it's sad, but you should try to work with it and try to find a way to get rid of it when you can, and somehow fix what you can with it while you have it. So we try to distribute power, and it's not just those 3 typical branches that you have to think about, the legislative branch, the judicial system, and the government. You have to think about the power of wealth and the power of the media. All the powers that weren't there when the normal legal theory was being written in the 1800s, and what there are there now. How do you distribute the power of wealth from the power of politics? That's something you have to address. How do you distribute the power of wealth from the power of media? You also have to look at that, and it's really important. So it's important to not get also just locked up in the typical power structure, because they are no longer the real power structures. The power lies hidden in other places. So we try to do that again and again and again with different methods. One really important is the direct democracy. In this, if this becomes the new constitution of Iceland, 10% of the people can veto any legal act from the parliament, and then it goes to a national referendum. 10% can also propose a new legal act. 10% of the voters can say, I want this to be the law. And then Parliament does get a chance, a year, to think if they can come up with a better legal act, and then the people will vote between the two. Also, 2% of the people can propose new matters in the Parliament. They can't put new legal bills like the 10% can, but they can put it on the agenda. So it's really trying to give the power back to the people. And I think it's really important to try to do that in every possible occasion now for the world, because it won't go on like this. Another thing that's in the document, if I talk a little bit about the biggest changes in this, is, and I like this part, is a protection of nature, just for nature's sake. Not how man can use nature, but nature has a right for its own, independent of the man. And this is taken from Bolivia and Ecuador. They are really advanced in this methodology. And we looked a lot at, of course, different constitutions from all over the world, but they are the most advanced in this area. And this happens to be, I think, a beautiful new step for Iceland, because we have a very beautiful country, but we have not been treating it with adequate respect in the past, and maybe it will change. Another thing that is very cutting edge in this is transparent public administration. Everything that the government or the public administration creates must be available to the public, all the documents. And this is done somewhere. It's done in Norway, for example, where you can find the whole list of every document available. And if you can't open it, there must be a reason why. Imagine how much corruption you could get away from if you just knew everything that the officials knew. Instead of having the lights switched off and then you have a flashlight and you try to figure out what's in there, you just have the lights on and you can see everything that's been created, because it's created in your power with your money. So why shouldn't you be able to see it? So this is a new, but it's an extreme version of transparent public administration. Also, we have the transparent ownership of the media, because you have to understand who's trying to brainwash you. They might continue to brainwash you, but at least if you know who it is, you're more likely to be able to decode it and resist it. Also, independence of the media. That the media and the whistleblowers and others, they cannot be touched, because you can't have a proper country, a proper democracy without good media. You don't get the information, you can't respond. We put in academic and artistic freedom also, because we found out in Iceland after the crash that the academia had been completely asleep, not critical enough, and just almost bribed, I would like to say, by the waste amount of money that was in the society. So it was just mute, and we tried to fight that. We put in a special mention of Iceland wanting to eliminate sexual violence in this. Maybe some people think that is very narrow and topical, but this is a really big problem for a lot of people in the world, and there's nothing wrong in mentioning especially what you want to fight in the future. We put in the rights of the child also, but that article we outsourced to UNICEF in Iceland and to a legal professor in children's law, and it came back with a really beautiful suggestion that we just put in. So the whole time we were just trying to find ways to do it in sort of the best way possible. We weren't thinking, how can we write this, but how can we get the best result? And if UNICEF wants to write the article about the right of the child, that's beautiful. And we have a better and more professional article, you know. We had a mention of the human dignity in this and the diversity of society. We don't want everybody to be the same. And the best of healthcare and all of this. But there is a few other things that I think are sort of new in this text that I think is interesting. For example, freedom of the internet. You know, it's not maybe an obvious threat, but I realized that when we started writing this, a lot of people who are very developed technically were watching what we were doing, because they understood it. They understood it better than the general public. And they were emphasizing largely on the fact that in the current situation, people are being held down by, of course, by you know, shutting down, like in China or something, but also just like in cutting internet access. And this, we think, is obvious. Nobody can do this to us, but it's not obvious. And this is sort of a future safehold that we put in. We put in also that people surely have democratic rights, but they also have democratic duties. Sorry for speaking so slow. Really sorry. Yeah, because sometimes we think, okay, I want this, I want my human rights, and I want all other rights, and I want money from the government, and I want, you know, and there's a long list of what you think you're entitled to, but there's no list of what you think you should contribute. That just is another issue altogether. And you can't take those two things apart. If we want to be a society, we have to be as willing to give the others as we are as willing to receive. And that, I think, is important to say in the text, because it's not obvious. Also, we put in a new voting system to try to break up the power of the political parties. We put in a system where people can go forward just a person, and we put in a system where all the votes of the country are equal. Because at the moment, the votes of the rural areas amount to much more than the votes of the urban areas, and that we wanted to eliminate. We put in the right to protest in this document, because it's not evident. And also, and it has been a lot of somehow debate in Iceland about this one, we put in animal rights. And that people think that is ridiculous in the constitution, some people, especially lawyers. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm a lawyer, but lawyers are very narrow-minded, you know, and they tend to sometimes to think, okay, don't change anything because it makes my life so difficult, you know. And when they saw the word animal right in the constitution, they really freaked out. Like we had put something completely outrageous in there, and I thought that was kind of cute, but it's in there because a lot of people from the public pointed out that this was an important article for them. And we thought in the Constitutional Council, we're 25. If 200 people of Iceland want animal rights in the constitution, why not? You know, it's not going to hurt. It doesn't say you can't kill a spider. It just says we have to protect the species from not being eliminated and protect animals from dignified, you know, something. Then there's the right of the environment, of course, and it has a special clause about education, and that education should include critical thinking and educational of human rights, because education is not education if it does not involve critical thinking. And it's just brainwashing and stupidifying. And I think that's part of our big problem, actually, of the world today, is that education has just gone off some route. Also, we had like the horizontal protection of human rights, which means that the state has to make sure that the people of Iceland are not violated of the human rights, even if it's from a company, you know. And then we had a lot of other things. I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore you. But I want to talk about the lessons of all this experience. It was a long experience, like I explained. Firstly, it started in 1944 when we got our independence. And then we were supposed to get a new constitution. Everybody was agreeing on it. But then it became like, my precious, and nobody wanted to give it away, the power. And in the end, we sat there 60 years later, banging pots and pans and thinking, hey, where's our constitution? And it was that's why I think sometimes that when you have crash or like you have troubles here, you can think, okay, this is devastating and this is horrible, but you can also think this is an opportunity, you know. And most devastating things, they happen for some reason. There is something that you could learn or better from it. I know nobody wants to have a crash and nobody wants to have bankruptcy or debt, but it still can be a very important lesson in there somewhere, or you can change something for the future. What I think was the most interesting lesson out of this is just the wisdom of the crowd. It's enormous, you know. You think that people just sit there and they're dumb and they're just watching television, but it's not the case. And what is more important is that the sums of the part is more than the equal. You know, if you have many people that want to contribute to something, it becomes much greater than even the number of the people, just because they're going in the same direction. And that's a very interesting part, I think, and it's beautiful. It's like some sort of a really beautiful natural phenomenon, and I never saw it before. Also, this consensus methodology is really important, and I think people should use it in life in general, because peace is not a destination somewhere. It's all the decisions that you make, you know. And then don't put overemphasis in the experts, because this whole this fetish of experts that we have in the West is just really destructive, I think, you know, and that you cannot listen to people and they're not supposed to have opinion of their own constitution unless they have a PhD. It's stupid. It's very stupid. So one of the things we were trying to do was just make the text into human language that people could read and understand and like, you know, that it sounded good. Because when you start putting this legal, suit onto the text, you're making a gap between the people and the text, and you're making the legal experts necessary to understand it, and you're taking the text away from its people, and that cannot be tolerated. So that's basically the sort of the story of the Icelandic scenario. There's been a lot of progress in Iceland since we had our crash in 2008. We had a new government. We had the first woman prime minister, who was also the first gay prime minister in the world. And we had a massive report with 9 books that explain why this happened. And it's just testimonials of people from everywhere inside the system, from the politicians, from the bankers, from everywhere, explaining what happened. And we can always go back to that book and see, okay, that's where we went wrong. It's really important because everybody agrees upon the truth lying in there, you know. So there's at least one place to start not arguing from, you know. We had the Constitutional Council, which was nice. We had 2 referendums where we said no to paying the debts of ISAF bankers. We had a court ruling saying that our Prime Minister was guilty of negligence, and this is really important because the top people of society must understand that they bear responsibility, and even if he did not get a jail sentence or a fine, his ego and his name was really hurt, and he was not a bad guy. He was just one of those corrupted elitists, and he thought he should get everything for free, and then he should just do things, in the computer and then get a medal and a statue or something. But he was the captain of the ship when it went down, and he's responsible. And that's what the court said. And that's really important. Also, we had our golden boys, the bankers, taken in jail to custody. You know, it's not nice, but it's part of the fairness. You know, and that they are not untouchable. We have had 3 or 4 court cases where really high up level people have been put to jail because they participated in either they used in-house information to sell stocks, or they were doing something slightly or very illegal, and they are not getting off. So the court system has proven to be very strong in Iceland and really supporting the rules that we had. Before they were sort of turning the blind eye, but after the crash, all these cases are coming now through the courts, and they seem to be doing really well. We had a special prosecutor office set up just to examine the fraud and all the banking craziness, And there are over 100 people working there trying to trace the money to Tortola or whatever it is, and trying to get the guilty people. And this is also really important. We need peace, but we also need reconciliation, and then people have to be responsible for what they've done. But what you have to remember, and what the frustrating part is, that it all takes time. It takes a lot of time. And when you are just sitting there, you feel like nothing is really happening. It's only when you come and look at it from the outside when you can see that a lot of things are happening. A lot of people still have a lot of debt that's really unfair, and they have problems paying their bills, and they have problems, they can't send their kids to music lessons, and it's not fair. They didn't do anything wrong, you know. So justice has not been brought over Iceland completely, but step by step, we're going somewhere, I think. The most recent development was the national referendum on the 20th of last month, where we had a referendum on whether people wanted this to become the foundation for a new constitution. And 67% said yes, which is beautiful because 67%, because the biggest conservative party was telling everybody to go there and say no. And that's a party that normally has maybe 30-40% of the votes. So people are not going to be told to do something stupid, not after the crash. And that's a really beautiful lesson that will also, I think, be valid in Greece. That after you had such a crash like this, things don't become the same again, you know. In Iceland, we now know that if our government screws up, we will just take to the streets and we will get them out. They no longer have the power over us. It has been reversed again to the right way, that we have the power over them. We just lend them our power for 4 years at a time. And then we want to be able to take it back when we need, just like a car has a handbrake. There are lessons like that that will last us for much longer, you know, and I really hope it did not just turn into the same mess all over again. And I do think that, what I learned from it most is just this huge appreciation for the wisdom of the crowd, which we can certainly trust. Thank you.